A room. In Geneva. It's 2 a.m. One of Europe's most powerful leaders is on the phone, and his voice is trembling. Who is he talking to? And why? You'll get that answer today. But first, a question. Have you ever wondered why Europe, the most stable, most prosperous, and most civilized continent in the world, is so terrified of one single man today? And that man is no dictator, no warlord. He is the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Friends, there are certain turning points in world politics that change the course of history. Trump's first election in 2016 was one such turning point. But his return in 2024? This isn't just a turning point. This is an earthquake. And where is this earthquake being felt the most? Not in Washington, not in Moscow, but in Berlin, in Paris, in Brussels, and in London. Europe, which has been America's most trusted friend for decades, is today afraid of that very friend. But where did this fear come from? How deep does it run? And the most important question, is this fear actually justified? Today, in this video, we will unpack that entire story, layer by layer, evidence by evidence. So get ready, because this is not just a political analysis. This is the real picture of the world we all live in. Let's go back to 1945. The Second World War has ended. Europe lies in ruins. Cities have turned to ash. Millions are dead. And the continent's economy is on the ground. At that moment, one country stepped forward. It didn't just send its army, it sent its money, its technology, and most importantly, it guaranteed security. That country was America. Under the Marshall Plan, America gave Europe approximately $13 billion. In today's terms, that would be well over $150 billion. And then came NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The foundation of NATO was a promise, a very simple, very profound promise. If anyone attacks you, we will all fight together. You are not alone. Europe rested its very sleep on that promise. For over 70 years, Germany kept its military weak. Why? Because America was there. France relied on nuclear deterrence. Why? Because America was there. Poland, the Baltic states, the Netherlands, everyone thought the same. But then, in 2016, a man arrived at the White House, and he said something no American president had ever said before. He said, NATO is obsolete. Europe initially thought, this is just election rhetoric. Trump won. Things will settle down. The system will hold. And honestly, during the first term, a lot did hold. The Pentagon continued to support NATO. The Secretary of State reassured Europe, and Trump himself showed up at NATO platforms, even if reluctantly. But in 2024, when Trump won a second time, those guardrails were gone. The people who used to restrain him were no longer there. Jim Mattis was gone. John Kelly was gone. Rex Tillerson was gone. This time, Trump was surrounded by people who said yes to everything he said. And this time, Trump's message was even clearer. In February 2024, at a rally, he said, and I'm translating his words here, I would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want with NATO members who don't pay. If you don't pay, I won't protect you. Europe's leaders heard this, and the ground shifted beneath their feet. Now you might be thinking, okay, Trump said some things, but words are words. Actual policy is different. Right. If only that were true. Let's look at the ground reality, Ukraine. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Europe immediately stood by Ukraine. Weapons were sent, money was sent, refugees were welcomed. And America? Under Biden's leadership, America was Ukraine's biggest supporter. Billions of dollars in military aid, intelligence sharing, partnership at every step. But after Trump returned, everything flipped. Trump said, "I'll end the Ukraine war in 24 hours." Europe asked, how? The answer slowly emerged. And for Europe, that answer was a nightmare. Trump's plan was Ukraine would have to give up some territories. A deal would have to be made with Russia, and American aid would stop or be reduced, meaning Putin would win. Europe's leaders understood. If Ukraine falls, who is next? Here, I need to give you a brief geography lesson. Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. These countries share borders with Russia. They are all NATO members. The people of these countries, and I'm not exaggerating, go to sleep every night thinking one thought. If Russia attacks us, will Trump's America come to our defense? Before 2024, this question was theoretical. Now it is existential. Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas once said, "NATO's Article 5 is not a guarantee. It is a promise, and promises can be broken." She said this in 2023. Today, in 2026, her successors are even more worried. Now let's come to what Europe doesn't speak about openly, but what causes the deepest pain in its heart. That is economics. Trump imposed tariffs, large tariffs, on European goods, on steel, on aluminum, on cars, and many other things. The European Union and America trade approximately $900 billion worth of goods every year. This is the world's largest bilateral trade relationship. And when Trump said, "Europe is ripping us off," it wasn't just a statement, it was a policy. Germany's economy, which was already weakened, took another blow. French factories started to worry. Italian manufacturers began to question. But even bigger than the tariffs was the message Trump sent to Europe. You are not our friends. You are our competitors. Hearing this, Europe's political establishment had to confront a reality. The relationship they had called friendship for 70 years was perhaps just an arrangement. But here the story becomes even more complicated. Because Europe's fear isn't just of Trump. Europe is also afraid of itself. Let's understand this. When Trump first won in 2016, Europe's leaders said, "This was an accident. American voters made a mistake. Next time, things will be fine." Then Biden came, and Europe breathed a sigh of relief. But in 2024, Trump won again, by an even larger margin. Now Europe's leaders had to accept an uncomfortable truth. Trump is not an aberration. He is a symptom. He is a symptom of that large section of America that believes, why should we be the world's policeman? Europe is rich. Let them defend themselves. We should think about our own home. And this thinking will remain in America even after Biden, regardless of who becomes president next time. Europe is now realizing the America First world may be permanent. Faced with this fear, Europe made some decisions, some historic decisions. First, defense spending. NATO had always said every member country should spend at least 2% of its GDP on defense. But for decades, most European countries missed this target. Germany spent only about 1.2%, and America was furious about this. But after Trump's second term, Germany made a decision in 2025 that was unprecedented since World War II. It amended its constitution, loosened the debt brake, and created a special defense fund of 100 billion euros. France began conversations about extending its nuclear umbrella to all of Europe. Poland announced plans to build Europe's largest conventional army. These are all signals. But these signals also reveal a deeper truth. Europe knows. If Russia attacks tomorrow and America says no, Europe will be alone. Now let's come to something nobody talks about openly. That is, the relationship between Trump and Putin. This topic is so sensitive that Europe's leaders avoid it in their public statements. But in private? In early 2025, when Trump held a phone call with Putin, without informing European allies, without informing Ukraine, there was panic across Europe. Emergency meetings were held at France's Élysée Palace. Late-night calls were made in Berlin. Extraordinary sessions were convened in Brussels. In those meetings, there was one question: what did Trump tell Putin? And why weren't we told? This question wasn't just diplomatic, it was existential. Because if America and Russia are making some kind of deal, if Trump is giving Putin some kind of concessions, then what role does Europe play in that deal? Will Europe's opinion even be asked? Or will Europe simply accept it? This is where Europe's fear reaches an entirely new level. Because this fear isn't just about Russia. It's the fear of that possibility, two superpowers, America and Russia, together deciding Europe's future, without Europe's consent. There is one more character in this entire story, one we rarely talk about, but who is very important. That character is the division within Europe itself. Europe is not one. It is a club of 27 nations. And these 27 countries have very different priorities. Hungary's Viktor Orban, he is a fan of Trump. He's not afraid of Russia. He aligns more with Trump's politics than EU mainstream politics. Slovakia's Robert Fico, he's in the same camp. But Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they don't sleep at night. This division weakens Europe because the EU requires unanimity for major decisions. And when Hungary or Slovakia exercises a veto, Europe cannot react as one. Trump knows this. Putin knows this. And this knowledge is Europe's greatest vulnerability. Let me get a little personal now, because political discussions remain abstract until you see them through the eyes of people who are living it. A family lives in Warsaw. The father is an engineer. The mother is a teacher. They have 2 children. In 2021, they bought a house, took out a loan, made plans for the future. In 2022, the Ukraine war began. Their home is 300 kilometers from the Belarusian border. They packed an emergency bag, some important documents, some money, some clothes. That bag still sits in the corner of their bedroom today. When I heard this, a journalist friend shared this story. I realized something. Europe's fear is not some abstract concept. It is a real bag, sitting in a corner, reminding every single day just how much the world has changed.
Now, let's come to a very important question.
Is Europe's fear justified, or is it just an overreaction? There are 2 sides to this, and for a fair analysis, both need to be heard. First perspective, those who say the fear is justified. These people say Trump himself has questioned NATO's credibility. He has used Ukraine as leverage. He has financially hurt Europe through tariffs. And the closeness he has shown with Putin is unprecedented. These facts cannot be ignored. Second perspective, those who say Europe is overreacting. These people say America's strategic interest lies in European security. Trump may be chaotic, but America's deep state, the Pentagon, and bipartisan consensus still support NATO. And there has always been a gap between Trump's words and his actual policies. This perspective is not completely wrong either. But here's the problem. When you are the leader of a small country, when your border touches Russia, when your country's history includes Soviet occupation, then you cannot bet on maybe Trump won't actually do it. Because if your bet turns out to be wrong, the price you pay is your country's freedom. One more incident from 2025. Trump spoke about Greenland. Again. Greenland, Denmark's autonomous territory, sitting in the Arctic, one of the most strategically important pieces of land on Earth. Trump said, "America wants Greenland." Denmark said, Greenland is not for sale. Trump threatened tariffs. And then his vice president visited Greenland. Without an invitation, Europe just watched. This moment was a wake-up call for Europe. Because if America can lay claim to the territory of a NATO ally, then the rules-based international order, which America guaranteed for decades, where is that order now? Now let's talk about what Europe is quietly doing. Because Europe isn't just sitting there in fear, Europe is adapting. And this adaptation is fascinating. First, the concept of strategic autonomy. France introduced this idea first. Emmanuel Macron said, Europe needs to be strategically autonomous, meaning self-sufficient in its own defense, its own foreign policy, its own technology. At first, other European countries dismissed this as French arrogance. Now they all agree. Second, defense cooperation. In 2025, the European Union took an unprecedented step. For the first time, joint defense procurement began at the EU level, meaning Europe will buy weapons together, produce weapons together. This might sound small, but historically, it is enormous. Third, the nuclear conversation. France has nuclear weapons. Now, a conversation has begun. Is France's nuclear deterrent only for France or for all of Europe? This conversation would have been impossible in 2019. In 2026, it is mainstream. Fourth, technology decoupling. Europe is now trying to reduce its dependence on American tech companies, in AI, in cloud computing, in semiconductors. All of these are signals of a massive shift. Europe is slowly realizing the world has changed, and if we are to survive, we must change ourselves. But here lies a paradox. And this paradox is also Europe's greatest tragedy. The more Europe tries to become independent, the more it feels just how dependent it has been. In defense, Europe spends a large portion of its defense budget on American weapons. If America cuts off supply, what does Europe have? In intelligence, NSA, CIA, the Five Eyes network, Europe's intelligence is largely dependent on American sources. In finance, the dollar is still the world reserve currency. Europe depends on SWIFT, which is under American influence. In technology, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, Europe's data centers, cloud infrastructure, communications, all are in the hands of American companies. This dependency was not built in one generation, and it will not be broken in one generation. This is Europe's deepest fear. That if something big happens tomorrow, Europe, despite all its resources, will be helpless. Now let's move to the most important question. All of this is happening. So what is Russia doing? Putin is sitting and watching and smiling. Because Russia's grand strategy has always been this: divide the West, separate America from Europe, weaken NATO. And Trump? In Putin's eyes, Trump is a gift. No, I am not saying Trump is deliberately helping Russia. That is a large and complicated debate. But practically, what is happening is benefiting Russia. There is uncertainty in NATO. There is panic in Europe. Ukraine is exhausted. And America is thinking about itself first. Putin attacked Ukraine in 2022, thinking it would be over in 3 days. He was wrong. But if America pulls back from Europe, Russia's calculations change entirely. And Europe knows this. I want to tell you about one final moment. February 2025, the Munich Security Conference. The world's greatest leaders, diplomats, and security experts gather in one place. At this conference, America's Vice President J.D. Vance arrived, and he delivered a lecture to Europe that was unprecedented. He accused Europe of suppressing free speech, of not listening to its own people, of being elitist. This is the conference where Russian aggression is discussed, where Ukraine's security is discussed, where NATO's unity is discussed. And America's vice president was there giving Europe a morality lesson. The faces of Europe's leaders were something to behold. A senior European diplomat present there told journalists afterward, "It cannot be described. We were all just stunned." In that moment, Europe realized, this is not just a policy change. This is a fundamental transformation of the relationship itself. So where does this all leave us? Europe's fear is real. But this fear is not weakness. It is an awakening. After 70 years of sleep, Europe is waking up. It is understanding that there are no permanent friends in this world, no permanent guarantees. And if you cannot defend yourself, no one will do it for you. This is a bitter truth, but it is the truth. And perhaps history will remember it this way. Trump's second term was the moment Europe finally grew up, when it shattered its comfortable illusions, and when it decided, we must write our own future. But one final question. Is this just Europe's problem today? Think about it. If NATO weakens, instability grows in Asia too. If the rules-based order breaks down, every country, large or small, becomes unsafe. If superpowers abandon their allies, what options are left for smaller nations? This question doesn't belong only to Europe. It belongs to Taiwan, to South Korea, to Japan, to Israel. And in a broader sense, it belongs to all of us. Because we live in an interconnected world. When America sneezes, the world catches a cold. And when America deliberately weakens its alliances, something far bigger might happen to the world. Let's return to that night in Geneva. That European leader on the phone. Who was he talking to? He was talking to his defense secretary. One question. If something happens tomorrow, how many days can we hold on alone? The answer? That answer is classified. But this much is known. After hearing that answer, the leader put down the phone, looked out the window, into the darkness of the night, and in his eyes was a resolve. We will be ready. We have to be. Friends, politics is complicated. Every situation has multiple angles, and I don't claim to have all the answers. But one thing is clear. The world is at an inflection point. And at that inflection point, none of us are mere observers. We are participants. If you've watched this video all the way to this end, you are among those who want to understand, who want not just headlines, but the real story. That is enough. Because understanding is the first step. And the first step is always the most important one. This was today's video. If you found it valuable, share it with those who want to understand this world. And tell me in the comments, do you think Europe will be able to face this challenge? See you in the next video with another story, another truth. Until then, keep thinking.